The CBC's Diana Swain interviewed Franck Gervais on Remembrance Day in Ottawa, and she joins us now live in studio. And so, Diana, first of all, I guess the question on a lot of people's minds is, how did you come across this guy?
How did I find the one fake in 50,000 people? A skill, I guess. My assignment that day was to talk to people in the crowd as this ceremony was happening. And so the ceremony itself had wrapped up. And I'd noticed through the morning that there were lots of people there in military uniform of all different machinations. And that was part of the story for me, to see them all there within the crowd. What's interesting was he was standing near some other people who were wearing military uniforms. I don't think they were with him. I'm sure that they weren't, in fact. And one man, I nearly interviewed him, but a prayer had just wrapped up. And he looked very moved, and I didn't want to interrupt him in that moment. And so I went to the next person, who turned out to be Franck Gervais. And we did what's called a pre-interview. In TV terms, I said to him, I'm Diana Swain, we're doing this live broadcast. Would you mind talking to me about your thoughts about the service this morning? I asked him his rank, his name, where he lived, none of which turns out to be true.
But he had answers to all your questions. Yeah.
And, and I looked at the medals. He looked like a decorated soldier. And I said, okay, we'll be back in about a minute and a half to do this live interview. And we did that. So at no time did he say, I don't want to do this. What's interesting, Rosemary mentioned his wife, or the woman who I now know to be his wife. I assume she was at the time. To me, she looked very nervous. She didn't say anything. And I actually assumed it was because of the camera, because we often encounter people who are nervous to be on camera, don't want to be. And I actually said to her, don't worry, you don't have to be in the shot if you don't want to. And we did the interview, as I say, afterward with her husband, and she didn't say anything then either. Now, of course, I, like many other people, are wondering, was she nervous because of the camera, or nervous because she realized now this was going to be on camera and people who would know what to look for, which I did not, would recognize that he was not a real soldier.
Maybe she didn't know. We don't know.
The wedding picture has us all asking.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how long ago that wedding was. They look very similar in the photo. Did she find out yesterday that her husband is not who he purported to be, or has she known? So many questions that have arisen out of this.
So when did you find out that he was a fake soldier?
Not in time.
Yeah.
We had done the broadcast. I had done a number of stories through the day. And actually, I was at dinner Tuesday night, and I got a tweet from someone who said the person you interviewed may have been a fake. I was surprised. I can't think of any time in my career this has happened, actually. It was the next morning after I flew back from Ottawa, landed in Toronto, turned on my phone and realized that so many people were now talking about this and finding the details that showed that this was not a proper military uniform. And frankly, I was mortified. I was horrified on that day of all days to have that interview with someone who was not who they said they were in that place. I still can't quite get my head around it.
Yeah, and you know what, it seems, though, from the reaction online, that a lot of soldiers can't get their head around it either, and they're certainly sympathetic. How would you know, how would you expect that?
Well, my first thought was, should I have been able to tell very quickly that he was not who he said he was? And people have been very kind, a lot of military people saying, you had to take a much closer look. You had to know what you were looking for. In fact, the first person who appeared to identify this on Facebook said, I thought he was in my regiment because of what he was wearing. And I went back and looked at the name and then realized it wasn't there and started looking more closely. So they've been very kind to say you wouldn't necessarily have known, and none of the people around us remarked during the interview. But like a lot of veterans, like a lot of Canadians at large, I would love to know why this happened. Are there issues there at play there that we don't know about, or is this someone simply pretending to be someone he's not, and why?
Yeah, and the police also want to find out, because now there's an investigation, so that'll certainly be interesting to see all this. But Diana, strange day, but thank you for coming on and explaining it to us. We appreciate it. That's the CBC's Diana Swain.